I'll call everyone. Professor Seema ma'am, I request you to come onto the dais. Good morning, Adab. I welcome you all to this one-day conference on Cosmopolitan Deccan organized by HKSCDS Centre for Deccan Studies, Maulana Azad National Urdu University, Hyderabad. Welcome you all once again. Thank you. At the outset, I request our Honorable Vice Chancellor Sahab, Professor Syed Ainul Hasan, to felicitate our chief guest, Sri Konda Vishweshwar Reddy, Member of Parliament, the present Lok Sabha. I also request Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir to felicitate our keynote speaker, Professor Seema Alavi. Thank you, sir. Let us start the program with the University Tarana.
ये बाबे शहरे इल्म है उर्दू ज़बान का, ये बाबे शहरे इल्म है उर्दू ज़बान का। आओ सफ़र यहाँ से करे आसमान का, बाबे शहरे इल्म है उर्दू ज़बान का। इल्मो कमाल फज़लो शियारो शूर तक फैली है दिल नवाज महक दूर दूर तक। मिलता यहाँ निसाब है सारे जहान का, ये बाबे शहरे इल्म है उर्दू ज़बान का, ये बाबे शहरे इल्म है उर्दू ज़बान का। हर नक्शो रंगो बू से करो अपनी गुफ्तगू, आजाद दरसगाह की है ये भी जुस्तजू। सब फासला मिटा बढ़ाते चलो दरमियान का। ये बाबे शहरे इल्म है उर्दू ज़बान का। ये बाबे शहरे इल्म है उर्दू ज़बान का। ग़र्बो जुनूब से होके शर्क़ो वो शुमाल से, आगे बढ़ो ख़याल मिला दो ख़याल से। चर्चा हो कायनात में हिंदुस्तान का। ये बाबे शहरे इल्म है उर्दू ज़बान का। फसले सदा बहार से बस्ती बसी रहे, मिलकर दुआ करो कि ये खेती हरी रहे। साया रहे सरों पे किसी साहिबान का। आओ सफर यहाँ से करे आसमान का। ये बाबे शहरे इल्म है उर्दू ज़बान का। ये बाबे शहरे इल्म है उर्दू ज़बान का।
That was our university Tarana, penned by our own Vice Chancellor Sahab, Professor Syed Ainul Hasan Sahab. Now I request Professor Salma Ahmed Farooqi, Director HK Sherwani Centre for Deccan Studies, to give a brief about the conference.
Honorable Chief Guest, Shri Visheshwar Reddy Garu, Member of Parliament, Honorable Vice Chancellor, MANUU, Professor Syed Ainul Hasan Sahab, our keynote speaker of this inaugural session and eminent historian, Professor from Ashoka University, Delhi, the Registrar in charge of our university, Professor Siddiqui Mohammad Mahmood, the lovely audience present in the hall, respected colleagues and dear students, Adab and good morning to you all. I welcome you all to this inaugural session of the one-day conference on Cosmopolitan Deccan. This conference is very important for us. The theme of this conference is of great relevance in today's world. When we thought about this theme, we started to think about the speakers. And I must say that when we approached them, they were more than kind enough to agree to speak on the topics that we suggested. I'm indeed very grateful to all the speakers. The idea of Cosmopolitan Deccan was the result of centuries of cultural interaction and exchanges that took place in the Deccan over a period of time. It was mainly the mixing and mingling of communities and groups of people that led to the evolution of a very distinct culture. This culture was based on diversity, heterogeneity, mingling and mixing. And in fact, it is this particular culture that has become the hallmark of the Deccan even till today and remains so. Nowadays, whenever we come across different types of works on the Deccan, we often see the terms cosmopolitan, syncretic, and composite. These terms are political philosophies that advocate diversity and cultural pluralism and go beyond the privileging of a single trend. In this particular conference on Cosmopolitan Deccan, we have a host, we have a range of speakers who are going to speak about different aspects of the Deccan, ranging from art, architecture, trade, religion, cuisine, and language and literature. I hope you all enjoy the conference. I hope there will be healthy discussions in the conference. And I think it is the Deccan being the hub of cosmopolitan culture makes it a very fascinating theme to explore. Before I end, I would like to place on record my sincere gratitude to Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Syed Ainul Hasan Sahab, who wholeheartedly supports and encourages us in whatever pursuit we undertake from this center. I also am very grateful to the chief guest who has come in here today despite his busy schedule. Thank you, sir, for coming in here as the chief guest today. I'm also very grateful to all the speakers who have come from far and wide to be with us today and to enlighten us about different presentations on different aspects of the Deccan. And of course, a big thank you to all the audience present here. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, ma'am, for introducing us to the conference. Thank you. Now I request Professor Siddiqui Mohammad Mahmood, our in-charge registrar, to speak about the university.
Honorable President of the function, Professor Syed Ainul Hasan Sahab, the Vice Chancellor, Maulana Azad National Urdu University, our today's chief guest, और इस क्षेत्र के लोकप्रिय नेता हमारे मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट रेड्डी जी, कीनोट स्पीकर प्रोफेसर सीमा पालवी मैडम, डेक्कन स्टडीज की डायरेक्टर प्रोफेसर सलमा फारूकी मैडम, यहाँ पर मौजूद सभी डिग्नेटरीज, लेडीज एंड जेंटलमैन, indeed it's a great pleasure sir for me to introduce our university to you. मैं चाहूँगा सबसे पहले आप तमाम लोग हमारे मुख्य अतिथि, हमारे इस क्षेत्र के लोकप्रिय नेता, हमारे सांसद के लिए जोरदार तालियों से उनका स्वागत करें। मैं हमारे लोकप्रिय सांसद जी को ये बताना चाहता हूँ कि ये मौलाना आज़ाद नेशनल उर्दू यूनिवर्सिटी अपने आप में एक बहुत ही डिफरेंट, बहुत ही भिन्न विश्वविद्यालय है। कैसे? सबसे पहली बात तो ये मैं बता दूं कि इस यूनिवर्सिटी का निर्माण, इसकी स्थापना हमारे लोकप्रिय प्रधानमंत्री और भारत रत्न श्री अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी जी ने उन लोगों के लिए इसका निर्माण किया जो मेन स्ट्रीम एजुकेशन में नहीं आ सकते थे, जिनकी जो इकोनॉमिकल कंडीशन है उन्हें इस बात की इजाज़त नहीं देती थी, और मेन स्ट्रीम एजुकेशन में जहां इंग्लिश मीडियम का राज चलता है वो उससे भली भांति परिचित नहीं होने के कारण मेन स्ट्रीम एजुकेशन सिस्टम में नहीं आ सकते थे। ऐसे डाउन ट्रॉडन लोगों के लिए, ऐसे गरीब लोगों के लिए इस यूनिवर्सिटी की स्थापना श्रीमान अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी जी ने अपने युग में प्रधानमंत्री होते हुए की थी 1998। मैं ये बात भी बता दूं कि उनको इस बात से बहुत रुचि थी कि उर्दू भाषा इस देश में आगे बढ़े, तरक्की करे और भाषाओं की तरह से उसका भी अपना एक स्थान हो। इसीलिए इस यूनिवर्सिटी का जो मैंडेट है वो उर्दू है। उर्दू को एक मीडियम के तौर पर स्वीकार किया गया है और यहाँ पर टर्मिनोलॉजीज इंग्लिश में भी इस्तेमाल होती है और मेन स्ट्रीम हिंदी और इंग्लिश दोनों टर्मिनोलॉजीज का इस्तेमाल करते हुए बच्चों को पढ़ाया जाता है। सर, उर्दू यूनिवर्सिटी होने का अर्थ बहुत सारे लोग गलत निकालते हैं। वो समझते हैं कि यहाँ केवल उर्दू भाषा और उर्दू साहित्य का ज्ञान दिया जाता होगा, लेकिन ऐसी बात नहीं है। यहाँ जो लैंग्वेजेस डिपार्टमेंट है लैंग्वेजेस का जो स्कूल है, स्कूल ऑफ लैंग्वेजेस, लिंग्विस्टिक और कंपैरेटिव स्टडीज, वो सारे लैंग्वेजेस को कवर करता है। उसमें उर्दू के साथ साथ वहाँ पर हिंदी डिपार्टमेंट है, इंग्लिश डिपार्टमेंट है, अरेबिक है, पर्शियन है, और अब हम फॉरेन लैंग्वेजेस भी हमने वहाँ पर स्टार्ट किया है। उसमें हम फ्रेंच की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं, जर्मनी की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं, जापानीज लैंग्वेज, टर्किश लैंग्वेज, बहुत सारे लैंग्वेजेस जो है हमारे जो इस वक्त के वाइस चांसलर हैं, उनका एक विजन है कि इस यूनिवर्सिटी को एक ग्लोबल स्टैंडर्ड पर लाकर खड़ा किए। तो लैंग्वेजेस जो स्कूल है उसमें इतनी सारी लैंग्वेजेस की पढ़ाई हो रही है, और अब तेलुगु और संस्कृत लैंग्वेजेस की तरफ भी हम आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। मैं ये बात बताते हुए भी बड़ा गर्व महसूस कर रहा हूं कि लैंग्वेजेस स्कूल के अलावा हमारे पास 7 स्कूल्स और हैं, जिनमें स्कूल ऑफ एजुकेशन है, स्कूल ऑफ सोशल साइंसेस है, स्कूल ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी है, स्कूल ऑफ कॉमर्स एंड मैनेजमेंट है, स्कूल ऑफ मास कम्युनिकेशन एंड जर्नलिज्म है, यहाँ तक कि स्कूल ऑफ साइंसेस भी है। और रिसेंटली हमारे वाइस चांसलर साहब के विजन और उनके उत्साह को देखते हुए यहाँ पर स्कूल ऑफ लॉ भी इस्टेब्लिश किया गया है। ये बहुत रिसेंट डेवलपमेंट है सर। मैं चाहूंगा कि आप तमाम लोग वाइस चांसलर साहब के इस डिसीजन का जोरदार वेलकम करें। सर, ये 8 जो हमारे स्कूल्स हैं जिनमें अलग अलग डिपार्टमेंट्स हैं, इनके अलावा हमारे बहुत सारे सेंटर्स और डायरेक्टरेट्स भी काम कर रहे हैं, जिसमें सेंटर फॉर प्रोफेशनल डेवलपमेंट ऑफ उर्दू मीडियम टीचर्स है, जहां पर उर्दू मीडियम के टीचर्स और मदरसा टीचर्स की ट्रेनिंग होती है और मॉडर्नाइजेशन ऑफ मदरसा एजुकेशन पर काम होता है। दूसरा हमारा जो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट सेंटर है सर, विमेन स्टडीज का। इस यूनिवर्सिटी का एक मैंडेट उर्दू का प्रमोशन है, तो दूसरा मैंडेट जो है विमेन एजुकेशन के लिए राह को हमवार करना है। तो विमेन स्टडीज सेंटर्स हमारे पास है। फिर यूजीसी का एक सेंटर जो है मदन मोहन मालवीय टीचर्स ट्रेनिंग सेंटर हमारे पास चल रहा है सर, और मुझे बहुत खुशी हो रही है बताते हुए कि इस सेंटर ने अपना एक स्थान बनाया है, नेशनल लेवल पर इसको 3rd रैंक मिला है। फिर इसी तरीके से हमारे पास इंक्लूसिव स्टडीज का एक डिपार्टमेंट है, फिर सेंटर फॉर उर्दू कल्चरल स्टडीज का एक डिपार्टमेंट है, और डायरेक्टर ऑफ डिस्टेंस एजुकेशन है। वो बच्चे जो रेगुलर मेन स्ट्रीम में नहीं आ सकते, उनके लिए डिस्टेंस एजुकेशन के जरिए से बहुत सारे प्रोग्राम्स चलाए जाते हैं। मैंने खास तौर से डेक्कन स्टडीज का सेंटर अभी उसका तस्करा नहीं किया। पहले मैं यूनिवर्सिटी के बारे में एक बात बता दूं। हमारे लोकप्रिय नेता को ये जानकर बहुत प्रसन्नता होगी कि आपके इस क्षेत्र में ये जो विश्वविद्यालय है, मौलाना आजाद नेशनल विश्वविद्यालय, इस विश्वविद्यालय ने सर नैक की तरफ से A+ ग्रेड हासिल किया है। और इतना ही नहीं, नैक की तरफ से A+ है, तो यूजीसी मदन मोहन मालवीय मिशन टीचर्स ट्रेनिंग सेंटर को 3rd पोजीशन हासिल भी है नेशनल लेवल पर। तो कहीं पर इसका जो है 4th नेशनल वाटर अवार्ड 2022 हमको हासिल हुआ है। उसी के साथ साथ बहुत सारे प्राइजेस, इसमें फर्स्ट प्राइज फॉर मेंटेनिंग ग्रीनरी इन द 7th गार्डन फेस्टिवल एंड फर्स्ट अर्बन फार्मिंग फेस्टिवल में हमको हासिल हुआ है। और कई उपलब्धियां हैं, कई कामयाबियां हैं जो मैं आपके सामने रखना चाहता हूं, लेकिन समय के अभाव के कारण मैं रख नहीं पा रहा हूं। अब मैं आता हूं डेक्कन स्टडीज सेंटर पर, आज जिसके तहत कॉन्फ्रेंस हो रही है। सर, ये एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण सेंटर है, और इस सेंटर के बारे में मैं क्या कहूं। यहीं के दक्कन के एक शायर ने, एक कवि ने ये बात कही है कि खुद की खातिर न जमाने के लिए जिंदा हूं, खुद की खातिर न जमाने के लिए जिंदा हूं, कर्ज मिट्टी का चुकाने के लिए जिंदा हूं। तो जहां हम ग्लोबल लेवल की बात करेंगे, वहीं पर हमारा अपना जो क्षेत्र है, इस क्षेत्र का, यहाँ की जो संस्कृति है, यहाँ की जो भाषाएं हैं, यहाँ का जो रहन सहन है, इसको भी हम ग्लोबल लेवल पर दिखाना चाहते हैं, डिमॉन्स्ट्रेट करना चाहते हैं। और आज का जो थीम है, वो थीम भी आपके इल्म में है कि हम यहाँ की कॉस्मोपॉलिटन जो माहौल है, उस माहौल को, उस वातावरण को, उस कल्चर को, उस संस्कृति को सारे विश्व के सामने रखना चाहते हैं, और इसीलिए इस सेमिनार का यहाँ पर आयोजन किया गया है। सर, आपने हमारा निमंत्रण स्वीकार किया, इसके लिए हम आपके आभारी हैं, और आप एक बार फिर आपका यहाँ पर हम वेलकम करते हैं। मैं आज की कीनोट स्पीकर अन्वी मैडम का भी इस्तकबाल करता हूँ, आप तमाम लोगों का तहे दिल से इस्तकबाल करता हूँ। यूनिवर्सिटी को इस बात पर बड़ा फख्र है कि हमारे हर अच्छे काम में यहाँ के लोग हमारा साथ देते हैं। मैं आप तमाम का शुक्रिया अदा करते हुए आपका वेलकम करता हूँ। थैंक यू सो मच।
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving us a brief about the university. Now, I request our chief guest Sri Konda Vishweshwaredi Garu to deliver a lecture. But please, sir, once again, before inviting him onto the stage, I would like to give a brief introduction about him. Sri Konda Vishweshwaredi is presently the Member of Parliament in the 18th Lok Sabha from Bharatiya Janata Party and represents Chevella constituency of Telangana. He has his MBE Electrical Engineering from University of Madras. He has a master's degree from the New Jersey Institute of Technology, United States. He is a successful software entrepreneur and he founded Citadel Research and Solutions, a company involved in engineering research and development. He was involved in the creation of several intellectual property rights also. As a professional, he worked for General Electric as a CEO and Managing Director for Wipro. He is an engineer, entrepreneur, and politician and has special interests in innovation, renewable energy, technology, and sustainable agriculture. He is the only parliamentarian from India to be granted a US patent while serving as a member of parliament. In the parliament, he has debated issues related to climate change, infrastructure in solar power plants, and funding of renewable energy projects by banks. He has been actively involved in the promotion of biofuel and Atomic Energy Amendment Bill 2015. He is the grandson of Sri K.V. Rangareddy, after whom the district Rangareddy was named. He is and interest in promoting the rich cultural heritage of the region. Now I request Sri Konda Vishweshwaredi Garu to deliver his address.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Syed Ainul Hassan Ji, the Registrar Ishaq Ahmed Ji, Professor Ishaq Ahmed Ji, the Head of the HK Sherwani Center for Deccan Studies, Professor Salma Ahmed Faruqi Ji, our keynote speaker, Professor Seema Alvi, and Dr. A. Subhashji, Assistant Professor, HK Sherwani Center, and the dignitaries and the students present here. To me, indeed, it's a great honor to be here. And I was pleasantly surprised, although I'm from here, I did not know there was a Center for Deccan Studies in this university. I did visit the university several times in the past, but this is the first opportunity I had. I'm also very thankful to Professor Siddiq Mohammad Masood ji, because, sir, there is a galatfehmi, Hyderabad mein galatfehmi hai, कि मौलाना आजाद उर्दू नेशनल उर्दू यूनिवर्सिटी उर्दू और उर्दू लिटरेचर के बारे में है, मगर अब पता चला यहाँ लॉ कॉलेज है, और वाइस चांसलर जी ने बताया कि there's a fashion and design institute here. So it's indeed a pleasant surprise for me, sir. And this such institute, many people in Hyderabad have a wrong impression. So starting with me. Thank you, sir. But I'm also very happy to be at this center and addressing today's conference, which is on the cosmopolitan nature of Deccan. And while I did not study this subject deeply, I experienced it. Having grown up somewhere near the old city between Mozamjai Market and Afzalganj in a small locality called Feel Khana, so I did experience it. Having grown up in a family, so thank you for mentioning my grandfather's name, sir. I'll tell you a little bit about him. He was a member of Nizam's Majlis-e-Wajah Khanavis. Many of you don't know this term. This meant the Legislative Assembly of the Nizam. He was an MLC there. And he was an MLC there because he was an eminent lawyer of those days. And that was the lawmaking body under the Nizam's government. And he was a very eminent lawyer, and those days law was practiced in Urdu. And all the reference books of the law unlike other parts of India, probably even Uttar Pradesh, while law was practiced in Urdu, the reference book in Deccan were mostly in Persian. So he was also a great Persian scholar, Konda Venkat Rangareddy, whom the district is named after. But besides that, I grew up listening to music of Kundandal Saigal, or Bismillah Khan, Shehnai, or Ostad Bade Udamani, or Bhimsen Joshi. That's the Hindustani music I grew up listening. And we just finished Vinayaka Chaturthi. And Vinayaka Chaturthi, we have this Undrala Payasam, which I grew up eating Undrala Payasam as well as Sheer Kurma, which almost tastes the same actually. And I grew up wearing sherwani. I have a photograph of me wearing sherwani and wearing a dhoti. So I did experience this rich Deccan culture. But growing up, I went to the University of Madras. When I went to Madras, I was treated, "Arey, aap North India se hai." And when I went to some of my Delhi friends, when I said, "Nakkoji," "Arey, ye kya bhasha hai?" "Nakkoji." Then I explained, "I don't want it." "Arey, nahi chahiye bhai." I grew up thinking, this is the language, this is the Indian language. Then we all have a notion of India. When I went abroad, of course, the notion is how you are brought up, which language you spoke, who you mixed with. And my notion was India was very, very Deccan in nature. My memories are very Deccan in nature. And when we speak in Telugu, and that is when it really struck me. We have something special here in India. We are neither North Indians, we are not South Indians. And when we speak in Telugu, the normal, then we had this huge Telangana agitation. And Telangana agitation, when I used to speak, the normal Telugu word for close the door, if anyone is pure Telangana here, Darwaza Banjai. It's nothing to do with Urdu or Hindi. It's a very pure Telugu, Hyderabadi Telugu. There are only three words in this. One of them is Urdu, one of them is Hindi, one of them is Telugu. Darwaza Banjai. And when you say Nakko and say Darwaza Banjai, then I started feeling I'm something special, I'm something different. But actually, if you look at it, Telangana or the Deccan region is actually the heart of India, where everything mingles. And in fact, during the Telangana agitation, that's when my entry into politics also was something to do with the uniqueness of this. Hyderabad and Deccan had a distinct culture, and we were fighting for that. And this was lost because in the 20 years or 15 years I stayed abroad and came back, the lingua franca of Hyderabad changed. I was made fun because I said Darwaza Banjai. I was made fun because I this thing. And that is only the cultural aspect of a much deeper thing. And those days, there were a lot of divisive forces. They were saying that, and this is another thing, which I think we already lost the battle, which I don't know how we are going to do. Urdu has become a Muslim language instead of being an Indian language. I think we more than half lost the battle there. But my very entry into politics, starting with a mushaira competition, because there was a divisive forces. It said the Muslims were against, I'm sorry to bring in politics, I'll keep it brief. This is academic university. Were against the formation of a separate state, and some of the Hindus were for separate state, and some of the political parties this way, that way. And that is when we had a huge mushaira program, which many scholars from both communities, many communities actually participated. I also am proud to say that Asghar, the takhallus of one of my relatives, the pen name, his name was Asghar. And his real name was Raja Rajeshwar Rao. He's my cousin's great-grandfather. And he was the greatest of the Urdu poets from North Telangana, not from Hyderabad. If you say Hyderabad, there are many more Urdu poets. And under his pen name Asghar, he translated Ramayana into Urdu. He translated several Persian books into Urdu, wrote a lot of his own poetry, created, and a lot of these books are right now in the University of Karachi. And some of them are still lying here. So I very proudly stand before you, not with knowledge, but with the experience of growing up in this cosmopolitan culture. But yes, I've been to many programs where a lot of eminent dignitaries agree that we need to preserve this culture. But the fact is, why should we preserve this culture? I think we can preserve the culture better than anyone else before. In libraries and in high definition audios and high resolution videos, we can preserve culture more than ever before in history. We can preserve culture. But this culture is not to be preserved. It is to be a part of our daily lives and out in the streets and not in libraries and museums. So one of the challenges before the Deccan Centre is, I'm sure you'll do a wonderful job preserving the culture, but how does it go? How do you interact with the community around? And starting with the community around doesn't even know. Only now I'll definitely do my bit. That is not just about Urdu language and Urdu literature. So thank you, sir. Thank you once again for giving me this opportunity. I'm so proud to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We are extremely thankful to you and your views on the cosmopolitan nature of the Deccan. Now we have our keynote address by Professor Seema Alavi, madam. Before inviting her formally, I would like to give a brief bio note about her. Professor Seema Alavi is a historian who specializes in early modern and modern South Asia, with an interest in the transformation of the region's legacy from Indo-Persian to one heavily affected by British colonial rule. She started her teaching career at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and has been a professor at Jamia Millia and at Delhi University before moving to Ashoka University in 2022. Professor Alavi earned her PhD from Cambridge University. She has twice been a Fulbright scholar and a Smuts visiting fellow at Cambridge. In 2010, she was at the Radcliffe Institute at Harvard as the William Bentinck Smith Fellow. She has written numerous books on military, medical, and religious histories of India. Her more recent books are Muslim Cosmopolitanism in the Age of Empire, published by Harvard University Press, and Sovereigns of the Sea, published by the Penguin India. She also authored Sipais and the Company, Tradition and Transition in North India, published by Oxford University Press, and also co-authored with Muzaffar Alam a book titled A European Experience of the Mughal Orient. She serves on different editorial boards of several national and international journals, including Modern Asian Studies, Journal of Colonialism and Colonial History, Journal of the Royal Asiatic Society, New Delhi, etc. We are extremely thankful, ma'am, for accepting our invitation and coming all the way from Delhi. Now I request Professor Seema Alavi to deliver her keynote address on Muslim cosmopolitanism and the writing of world history.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Professor Salmat. Thank you to the Vice Chancellor, and it was a delight meeting him because I don't think many of you know that we have a very long association going back to my student days in Jawaharlal Nehru University in the 1980s. I was taught Persian by your Vice Chancellor, and I'm so happy to reunite with him after almost 3 decades. So it's a very special visit for me. Thank you, the Honourable Member of Parliament, Mr. Reddy. It was a delight to hear you and to share the stage with you. Just before I begin, I just want to say a few things, one of which is that cosmopolitanism is not only about across-community integration, which of course it is also about communities themselves, within themselves, integrating transcending various differences between them and carrying on some productive political projects. In other words, I'm not a historian of art and aesthetics and culture, neither am I a historian of the Deccan, but I think it's quite befitting that this very interesting conference, day-long conference on Cosmopolitan Deccan should begin with a little, lecture on the wider ramifications, meanings, definitions of cosmopolitanism, and how over a period of time, different communities in India have used this idea to integrate, to unite, and to fight British colonialism and British rule in India. It is in this context that I will be speaking to you today about how Muslim scholars and intellectuals used the idea of cosmopolitanism in the high period of British rule in the 19th century and contributed to the fight against British colonialism in India. So let me begin. So in this talk, I will focus on the 19th century axis of Muslim political thought across the British and the Ottoman empires in particular, but spilling also eastwards across the Indian Ocean to Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, and you can follow the map there. I call these centers cosmopolitan hubs that are in conversation and interaction with each other, and I identify in them strong lineages of cosmopolitan sensibility. I access these trans-imperial hubs by forefronting the individual. Indian Muslim scholars, professionals, and men of religion who move across these zones, negotiate, connect, and inject new meaning in them. These Muslim protagonists sought to encompass the imperial assemblage that they straddled within their capacious global cosmopolis. The imperially embedded cultural world they crafted offers us a lively canvas to write world history in fresh and more inclusive ways. One that recognizes and embraces this intellectually constituted Muslim world and does not view it as a hurriedly construed political project in response to Western expansion alone. Let me introduce to you my two protagonists for this morning. One was the Mughal gentleman legatee and Naqshbandi Sufi Haji Imdadullah Makki from the North Indian town of Bhuvan in Muzaffarnagar, and the other Sayyid Fazl, the Arab Hadrami origin Indian rebel of Malabar, modern-day Kerala in South India. Haji Imdadullah Makki and Sayyid Fazl belonged to Sufi orders, the Naqshbandiya and the Alawiya respectively, that shared a common belief in the salience of the Prophet and his tradition. Haji Imdadullah traced his intellectual genealogy to the 18th century Delhi Naqshbandi Sufi Shah Waliullah. His seminary forefronted the individual and laid emphasis on the self-interpretation of the Quran and the Hadith as a method by which Muslims could adjust to the changing political world of Delhi after the British had conquered the city. And Sayyid Fazl boasted of a genealogy that went back to the learned Alvi Sufi Tariqa, which claimed prophetic descent with origins in Iraq and its core based in the Hadrami region of Yemen. Both these Sufi orders forefronted the Muhammadan path or Muhammadan reality and used the Prophet's universal appeal as the glue to knit Muslims trans-imperially. Interestingly, and that's the reason why they become important for me, both these people were hounded out of India because of their alleged role in the lead-up to the anti-British 1857 revolt. And both left India and found refuge in the Ottoman cities of Istanbul and Mecca, which became their launching pad for fresh political careers. Here in Istanbul and Mecca, they tapped networks of knowledge and communication that connected British and Ottoman imperial cities in particular. They also plugged in these cities into the Muslim hubs of the Omani port towns and Dutch-controlled Aceh in the east in order to forge a kind of Muslim unity and manufacture a civilizational view to counter British rule in particular and Western ascendancy in general in 19th century India. I call these actors Muslim cosmopolitans and their sensibility for fighting British rule cosmopolitanism. This cosmopolitanism was partially traditional in that it invoked the Islamic principle of consensus to reconcile cultural differences amongst Muslims. But it was also new because it built on the Ottoman imperial vision as articulated in particular in the global aspirations of Khalifa Abdul Aziz and Khalifa Abdul Hamid, who were patrons of many of these Indian runaways, emigres who had escaped India due to the 1857 revolt clampdown by the British. This cosmopolitanism based itself primarily in Ottoman imperial cities and used the 19th century printing press, which was a new thing in the 19th century, and the Ottoman intellectual repertoires post the Tanzimat reforms that advocated political and moral reform in sync with contemporary ideas of science, reason, and rationality that they were encouraging all Muslim intellectuals to adopt. Let me get into this argument through the life of Imdadullah Makki to elaborate the political career of Muslim cosmopolitans. Soon after the anti-British Indian Rebellion of 1857, Haji Imdadullah Makki, the Muslim Naqshbandi Sufi, who had trained in Delhi Sufi Shah Waliullah's seminary, was on the run. He was on the run because there was an arrest warrant issued against him by the British police for his alleged role in the 1857 anti-British revolt. He escaped via the port of Karachi, from where he boarded a steamship, also a new device in the 19th century. He boarded this steamship to Mecca, which was then controlled by the Ottomans. The only time Imdadullah Makki had left India before the 1857 mutiny was for his Hajj. In this visit, he was warmly welcomed in Mecca by a host of Hindustani intellectuals who were already living in Mecca. And thus, when he escaped to Mecca for refuge after 1857, he was not unfamiliar to the intellectual climate of Mecca. It was here, interestingly, that he met with another Indian scholar and another 1857 fugitive, Rahmatullah Kairanvi, who had also escaped from British India and created a niche for himself in Mecca. Kairanvi had established a very popular Madrasa Saulatiya in Mecca, where Imdadullah was recruited as a teacher. This was a unique seminary founded with Indian funds and engaged in the dissemination of Naqshbandi reformist learning. It was a hub of intellectual activity which hosted scholars from across the Ottoman world, Indonesia, Cairo, and India. And Imdadullah benefited hugely from these interactions and was influenced by reformist scholars, in particular from Cairo, and the Ottoman Tanzimat impacted liberal ulama from the Arab provinces of the Ottoman Empire, all of whom were urging Muslims to take to science, reason, rationality to reform their lives in the 19th century and contribute to the emergence of a modern world. More importantly, Kairanvi's close association with Khalifa Abdul Hamid II and his frequent visits to Istanbul brought Imdadullah Makki's scholarly lectures on the interpretation of the Quran, Hadith, and Zikr, or the forms of devotion to God, to the notice of the city's intellectual and political elite, and to the notice of Khalifa Abdul Hamid himself. And Imdadullah Makki, in turn, was impacted by Ottoman reformist ideas rampant in Istanbul in the 19th century for science, reason, rationality, and the contribution of Muslims to the making of the modern world. Imdadullah used his new location in the Ottoman cosmopolitan cities of Mecca and Istanbul to further his agenda of uniting the Muslims as a civilizational force to counter British rule in India and general Western expansion in the 19th century. He tapped Mecca's long history of economic and religious connections with India, and he fashioned his cosmopolitanism as an urbane civility based on universalist Muslim virtuous conduct, his cosmopolitanism became like his politics, a political project which aspired to unite the Muslims via advocating a form of public conduct that invoked the Islamic tradition of consensus as laid out in the Quran and the Hadith to manufacture and showcase a form of urbane civility that was in sync with the fast-changing material world and which he thought would be a useful weapon to fight British Raj in India. In Mecca, he forged unity across the sectarian and Sufi silsila divide through the invocation of the Islamic principles of trust and faith, i'timad, and consensus, ijma. He derived his authority by drawing a middle ground for the four different Sufi families of the Naqshbandiya, Qadariya, Chishtiya, and Sohrawardiya. His attempts towards uniting the Muslims via a manufactured, standardized public conduct expressed primarily in bodily deportment, in devotion, zikr, was perhaps the first step towards being a Muslim cosmopolitan and uniting a whole range of people to fight Western imperialism. Interestingly, his Indic training in building consensus helped him in Mecca, where he smoothly slipped into the Ottoman tradition of writing what historians call consensus literature, in the context of social diversity and political need of the 19th century to unite the Ummah. Unfettered from the British imperial frame and away from his dissenting peers in Hindustan, he wrote 8 very important books to unite Muslims with greater confidence and robustness while in Mecca. These books in Urdu, Arabic, and Persian laid out the blueprint of his cosmopolitanism. But the book that made him very famous was written in Arabic while he was located at Mecca, titled Faisla Hafte Masla, Verdict on 7 Issues. It focused on the issues of custom and ritual that were controversial and caused frictions within the Muslim community, like Fatiha, Maulud, etc. With a view to minimize disagreements, he offered truce by saying that his opponents were not false, but needed to provide more evidence for their claims to be taken seriously. If Faisla Hafte Masla laid out the contours of his cosmopolitanism, it was his 1862 book, Ziaul Qulub, Light of the Heart, also penned during his Mecca stay, that lent it a universalist public conduct. This text reaches a middle ground in bringing different Sufi silsilas and sects of Muslims divided on issues of moderation, of devotion together by defining in universalist terms the role of the leader, guide, or murshid who would mediate between the individual and the text or God and lay down standardized universalist bodily deportment for devotion or zikr. Imdadullah's temporal and spatial location in Istanbul, in Mecca, gave him access to both the old repertoires of connectivity constituted by itinerant traders, literateurs, and pilgrims who had historically united the Ottoman Arab world to South Asia and to India, as well as it gave him a connection to new forms of connections offered via the imperial networks of steamships, the increased contact with India via the British management of the Hajj pilgrimage, the emergence of the telegraph in the 19th century, and most importantly, the emergence of the print media in the 19th century. He made the best use of both these networks, the old ones of traders, merchants, and the new ones of steamship, telegraph, print, to write the Ziaul Qulub. The manuscript of which I found very interesting, traveled clandestinely back and forth from India to Mecca, smuggled through Hajj pilgrims and traders because he was a fugitive, he was a runaway from India. It went back and forth, vetted, edited, points taken, written, rewritten, and it was finally published in Saharanpur by a private printing press owner, one of Imdadullah's very trusted agent, Munshi Mumtaz Ali, who supervised its publication. while Imdadullah continued to live in Mecca. If Muslim networks expanded across the Ottoman and British worlds via Imdadullah Makki's intellectual forays, they traveled also across the Western Indian Ocean, if you can see on the map, to Zanzibar on the east coast of Africa, and eastwards to Aceh in Indonesia and to the Malay world via the Arab origin runaway from Kerala in southern India, Sayyid Fazl Alvi, to whom I now turn. Sayyid Fazl Alvi was an Arab Indian who was born in Malabar to the Sufi family of Sayyid Alvi, who had migrated from the Hadrami region in Yemen into the Malabar region of southwest India. By the way, he's no relative of mine. Let me issue a clarification. I'm a good Lucknowi from the north, away from Yemen and Malabar. This is just an aside. In 1852, the British Indian government, on the recommendations of the Malabar commissioners Connolly and Thomas Strange, deported Fazl to Hijaz on charges of anti-British activities, very much like Imdadullah, a case against him. Hijaz, as you can see on the map, between the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, Hijaz, one of the critical intersections of modern empires, offered a completely new life to Fazl, just like Mecca and Istanbul had ordered a new life to Imdadullah Makki. Fazl remained very active in Hijaz, both intellectually and politically, playing very stoutly on the imperial rivalries between the British Empire that had expelled him and the Ottoman Empire that was welcoming of him because it was so anti-British. And he carved out a cultural and political space for himself between empires, playing on their tensions and their rivalries. This space between empires, the British and the Ottoman, I will show that was very cosmopolitan, in striving at Muslim unity across empires for one common agenda, which was to fight Western imperialism and British rule. From 1880 until his death in 1901, Fazl contributed to the intellectual and political energy of Istanbul, which, as we saw earlier, was already the cosmopolitan thought zone that attracted scholar emigres from India, Cairo, Aceh, and Penang. In Istanbul, Sayyid Fazl wrote tracts in Arabic that ranged from religious ones to more political exhortations in support of the Caliph, to ones more socially embracive, written to glorify his Sufi order, and all his writings reflected the desire to unite Muslims using the universalist moral and ethical etiquette that derived from the Prophet's life and teachings and that was embodied in his Sufi tradition. A systematic etiquette and bodily deportment was passed on by Fazl to a range of disciples in Istanbul, from where they carried it as far as the Omani cities in East Africa and Indonesia, which were the other influential cosmopolitan hubs in the long 19th century of European ascendancy all over the world. Alongside uniting Muslims across empires via advocating a standardized devotional etiquette and bodily deportment, Fazl also projected himself as a pivot around which Muslim rebels from British Raj, subjects from different empires, could coalesce. He attracted towards himself the rebels of both British India and the Dutch Indies by flaunting his influence over the Ottoman Caliph and promising them his support. He wrote two very important political texts for establishing his closeness to the Caliph and digging his heels in the Istanbul elite circuits, the Tariqat ul-Hanifa and the Tanbi ul-Ukala. In these, he refers to the Sultan Abdul Hamid as the Caliph of Islam and praises his rule. In these texts, he even cites two traditions about the need to obey the Caliph. He says, whoever betrays the Sultan betrays God. These texts were more in the form of self-promotion to project himself as a possible conduit to the Caliph for Muslim political rebels across these cosmopolitan hubs who looked towards Istanbul for support to fight the British in India. Many of these rebels, of course, were related to Abu Sayyid Fazl by marriage, all the way from Hijaz to Southeast Asia, and that also kind of helped him to stretch his networks of support across the Indian Ocean world. Fazl negotiated the trans-imperial Muslim cosmopolitan axes, stretching all the way from India to West Asia, to Aceh, Indonesia. This was the cosmopolitan axis, Muslim cosmopolitan axis, which Fazl negotiated with finesse, cashing on imperial rivalries and fears. He hailed the Caliph, and in the next breath, he praised the British Empire and indirectly urged the Ottoman Sultan to fight the British, at the same time asking him, in other words, to follow the British model, playing on these political imperial rivalries of the 19th century, and thus carving out a rich political and cultural canvas between empires that included so many ethnic Muslims divided on different religious and cultural lines, and trying to integrate them all together for this common cause of fighting Western imperialism. Let me begin to conclude, and let me as a historian conclude by some suggestions of how this Muslim cosmopolitan canvas in the age of high imperialism, capitalism, and empire can provoke us to think differently in non-Eurocentric ways about the making of the modern world that became a reality at the end of the 19th century, and how we can shift our gaze from Europe, from its iconic moments like imperialism and capitalism, to a non-European network of people, their ideas, and their cosmopolitan sensibilities that we can begin to think about as contributory factors to the making of the modern world. Does the cosmopolitan world crafted by Imdadullah Makki and Sayyid Fazl offer us an alternative civilizational imperium on which to write world history? As a student and a historian of global and world history, this becomes a very important question for me, following the careers of Sayyid Fazl and Imdadullah Makki. Is it part of the modern world whose production is detailed beautifully in the works of Professor Chris Bailey and Jürgen Osterhammel, but which suffered from a conceptual Eurocentrism? For both Bailey and Osterhammel, the rise of the modern world's center of gravity remained 19th century Europe, which they viewed as exceptional and exclusive. By the way, both were my teachers, so this is a kind of students' take on the teachers. For them, the center of gravity of the modern world remained 19th century Europe, for which they viewed as exceptional and exclusive. And the telos of their respective narratives is the triumph of liberal capitalism. The triumph of liberal capitalism is the hallmark around which we can begin to envisage the making of the modern world. In contrast, this talk, hinging around Muslim intellectuals and scholars and cosmopolitan hubs across the Muslim cosmopolitan hubs across the Indian Ocean, suggests that the fit between Muslim networks and the world of empires narrows the gap between Europe and its others. It helps bring the Muslim intellectual cosmopolis in conversation with processes active in the making of the modern world. And more importantly, it inserts the rising significance of religion into the discussion of modern world history. And yet, I feel this way of anchoring South Asia and the non-European world more generally to world history does make the latter seem like a biography of elites alone, albeit in my case, Ashraf Sunni Muslim subjects of empire, gentlemen of color located outside Europe. Even though it is worth noting that the concerns of Muslim intellectuals were not entirely alien to the sensibilities of the subalterns. Muslim peasants in Bihar and Bengal were increasingly at this point of time fashioning themselves as sheikh in a bid to connect themselves to the life world of the Prophet. But still, I feel the new challenge for us as historians is to reach out to the world of history via a more encompassing social history perspective. This also means moving out of the circuit of intellectuals and literateurs alone and stepping into the everydayness of Muslim lives in the 19th century, in the age of empire. Did the imperial assemblage offer ordinary Muslims opportunities of making career moves? Can the social history of careering that I've been talking about bring together the everyday practice of ordinary Muslims and their independent human relationships, offer us a fresh perspective on world history that is different from what we get when we view the century in the frame of imperialism and capitalist expansion alone? These are some of the ways of moving forward with Muslim lives in the writing of world history, focusing on the period of the 19th century. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for such an insightful lecture on the contribution of Muslim intellectuals and scholars in the making of modern world. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Now I request Honorable Vice Chancellor Sahab MANUU, Professor Syed Ainul Hasan sir, to deliver his presidential speech.
In the name of the one who gave us life and wisdom, Honorable Vishweshwar Reddy Sahab, Member of Parliament, Professor Seema Alvi, Professor Ashoka University, Professor Siddiqui Mahmood Sahab, Professor of Education, Professor Salman Farooqi, Director of Deccan Studies, host of dignitaries, friends, colleagues, girls and boys. Now, here is a question. Of course, I was listening to Professor Seema, and she somehow managed, it's a vast topic in fact, but she managed to explain to us. Right from the kind of interaction started, and then Perso Arabic thread in Deccan tapestry. That is, I can make out. But yes, there are many more things as our Vishweshwar Reddy Sahab explained to us with the kind of relationship. Just now I received, a poem by Rajesh Sharra as well. In fact, I'm thankful to Shahid Bhai, you forwarded it to me, I think. And the last couplet I will read here, it is starting, Jidhar main dekhta hoon, us taraf ay jaane jaan tu hai. Jidhar main dekhta hoon, us taraf ay jaane jaan tu hai. Hari mein dil mein sakin hai, makine lamakan tu hai. And last line when he mentions his nom de plume, here कहाँ तक कर सके असगर बयान में रंगियां तेरी, आया तू है, नेहा तू है, नेहा तू है, आया तू है. This is somewhat, takes us to the entire history of Deccan in particular, Hyderabad, and how one can identify himself or herself with Hyderabad. There are certain conditions. First, you should have access to languages. One is Telugu, the other one is Dakkani Urdu, third one is English, and fourth one is Hindi or Hindustani, whatever you call it. Now, in my case, I have access to three, fourth one is in the pipeline. Now, see, this, my first visit to Hyderabad, I always mention that. It was way back in 1984. when I was invited as a poet. And you were talking about the Mushaira of 2011. I'm here to just mention Mushaira, Golconda Fort, and that would happen, you see, in 1984, when I was invited, and first time I saw Hyderabad. Then it was combination of some Lucknowi poets, some Hyderabadi poets. Like in Hyderabad, Akhtar Zaidi was there, Sadiq Naqvi was there, Saeed Shahidi was there, and from Lucknow side, Wamid Jaunpuri, Mahir Lucknowi, and Mahdi Nazmi. Now, when Mushaira happened, one of the local poets recited something which Lucknow people could not digest. What happened there? It happened, he recited कि आज हम जिस मकाम में बैठे हैं, still I remember, आज हम जिस मकाम में बैठे हैं, संगे बुनियाद उसका पत्थर है. मैं ये गोलकुंडा फोर्ट, आज हम जिस मकाम में बैठे हैं, संगे बुनियाद उसका पत्थर है. So then Lucknow people, they are there. And Sange Bunyad, Sang is stone, you see, and then again Patthar, so Patthar, why this? So they were raising objections. So, but Hyderabadi people, in order to defend, Hyderabadi poets, see, they were, no, Sange Bunyad, altogether you can see foundation. But spare is stone. The stone comes from Patthar. So, Sange Bunyad, foundation, stone is the foundation. Big, tussle going on, and Hyderabadi, they say, Mir ने भी कहा था, क्या कहा था, कि क्या मेरा माशूक मेरा जो अपना था बाशिंदा दक्कन का था. मीर ने कहा था, इसे मीर तकी भी, माशूक जो अपना था बाशिंदा दक्कन का. So on one hand, Deccan, on the other hand, Lucknow, a lot of interminglings have taken place over the period of history. Belgram se bahut log aaye yahan par. So what is happening? This literary discussion went on, you see, for a very long time, and then some poets, making frowning faces. Finally, what happened? Saeed Shahidi got up and he said, okay, in order to end up this discussion, let me recite one couplet. And he recited one couplet, and you see the spirit of that couplet, you note down. He says कि हम कफस में थे, हमारा जल रहा था आशियां, आंख से देखा न जाता था मगर देखा किए. So on one hand, आंख से देखा न जाता था, on the other hand, देखा किए. He justified that. Sange Bunyad jiska patthar hai. And then subsided, everything in that, the whole discussion. But, I have a lot more experience. 84, when, color TV just started, and in every restaurant and hotel, you see, wherever we were taken, you see, there was color TV, and then the whole Mushaira was, telecast at that time. So this somehow, one cannot explain what Deccan is, and in general, and particularly at Hyderabad. I've tried my level best to see Hyderabad through my naked eyes. But yes, you have to, have naked eyes. If there is a slight, parda, then you can't see this hijab. What happened? Daaf Dehlavi, he settled down in Hyderabad, and then he died in Hyderabad. And now there is auditorium also in the name of Daaf Dehlavi. So I was invited to Daaf Dehlavi's auditorium to preside over Mushaira. Just 2 years back. I went there, then I said, okay, I can't sit for a very long time because there's a long list of poets, in fact, one after another reciting, and mostly it was Mazahia, Mushaira. So I said, okay, I'm taking leave, and then went out. Outside, I saw 3-4 people standing, and then they were having a cup of tea. So I said, sir, please come and join us, you see. We said, ठीक है, चाय पी लेते. Then one person came forward and said, you know, Professor Sahab, उर्दू की यही पैदाइश हुई थी. दूसरे वाले आगे बढ़े, उर्दू का इंतकाल पुरमलाल भी यही हुआ. This you can't see. You have to remember all these things. This is Hyderabad. This is quality of Hyderabad. See? And then someone, you see, one day says this, a joke in Hyderabad, that एक स्कूल रिजल्ट आने वाला था. एक बच्चा जो है वो अपने घर के अंदर सीढ़ी से उतरा. ड्राइंग रूम में बाप बैठे थे. साहबजादे, आज आपका रिजल्ट आना है, लेके आइए. फेल हो जाइएगा तो मेरे को अब्बा ना कहना. फेल होना, मेरे को अब्बा ना कहना. खैर साहब वो गए वहां, रिजल्ट लेके आए. बैठे थे, क्या हुआ? नक्को पूछो बशीर साहब. See, this is Hyderabad and quality of Hyderabad. This is something great, and I feel, you see, to prolong my stay in Hyderabad. You know, in Delhi, what happened? You know, the capital city, Hyderabad, Delhi, and I spent 42 years in Delhi, and I have seen the kind of development in Delhi, in the Parastha, Dolgabad, and then Mehrauli, and then Purana Pela, Naya Pela, Lal Pela, and then Lutians, you know, I have seen. Bigla, Bana. Look at Hyderabad. Hyderabad bigla nahi, Hyderabad banta gaya. On one hand, Cyberabad, on the other hand, capital city, capital district. Now, what else you want in Hyderabad? Everything is there in Hyderabad. And above all, Vishweshwar Reddy Sahab. I am sure that you will have a brainstorming session and many more speakers will come out with certain facts and figures. And I wish you, Professor Salman, Parvati, for organizing such a wonderful conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your experiences with Hyderabad. Thank you for sharing some lighter moments. Thank you. We have reached the end of the inaugural session. Now I request everyone to stand up for national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे.
Thank you. We'll take a short tea break and we'll come back here.